Welcome to the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast, powered by lyceumce.com, where we discuss topics related to both sterile and non-sterile compounding pharmacy in an effort to promote compliance and increase quality. Please welcome your hosts, Brian Prince and Seth DePasquale.
Hello everyone, I'm Seth DePasquale, board-certified sterile compounding pharmacist. Happy Friday. And since it's Friday, that means another special edition of the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast. Every Friday, we look at a 483 to try to help us understand and learn more about compliance within sterile compounding. So let's jump right in. The learning objectives for today's 483, by the end of this, you should be able to discuss the importance of particulate in relation to microorganisms, explain why 0.5 micron and larger size particles are of great importance, and discuss 3 ways that we can minimize the number of particles in our clean room. In today's 43, we're going to be looking at non-viable particle counts, otherwise more accurately known as total particle counts, and why they're so important. So let's take a look at the 43 observation, then we'll dive into it a little bit deeper. So here we go. Observation 2, there's a failure to thoroughly review any unexplained discrepancy in the failure of a batch or any of its components to meet any of its specifications, whether or not the batch has already been distributed. Specifically, your firm either failed to initiate or failed to adequately investigate out of specification or OOS, including environmental monitoring, EM, failures, and sterility failures. The firm performs investigations under OOS and does not have separate procedures for investigations. Examples include, but are not limited to, the following. I'm going to just skip right down to D, because that's where it talks more about particle counts. So OOS 19-004, investigation concerning sterility failures for lots of glutathione and dexpanthenol was not conducted adequately. The lots were produced 26 days apart. The investigation documentation did not include an evaluation of production, including batch record reviews, EM for hoods and rooms, non-viable or viable particulates, personnel monitoring, press plates, cleaning logs for the room, qualification of the hood, retained samples, or previous OOS. And I just want to note that this is a repeat observation from inspection concluding on 6/29/17. So in this 43, it's noted that there was an out-of-specification result for environmental monitoring samples. I've talked in a previous podcast and post about viable particles, but this week, let's focus on non-viables. In Observation 2 under Section D, it talks about not further investigating sterility failures for 2 particular compounds. The investigation documentation did not include an evaluation of production batch records, EM for hoods, rooms, non-viable or viable particulates, personnel monitoring, press plates, cleaning logs for the rooms, qualification of the hoods, retained samples, or previous OOS. Sorry, I went through that really fast, but I already read that already. So why does it mention specifically looking at non-viable samples? Aside from all the others, let's take a quick look at a table that's from USP 797, which is actually from an international document, ISO 14644. I'm sure you've seen this before, but if you haven't, here it is. But what exactly do all these numbers mean, and why are they so important? In the left column, you have ISO classes, which are the classes of different areas of the clean room. Your primary engineering controls, or your hoods, are typically ISO class 5, and your secondary engineering controls, or your room, are typically ISO class 7, or you may have an anti-room that's an ISO class 8. In the right-hand column, you have the limits of the particle counts per cubic meter, meaning if you have particle counts higher than the numbers in this column corresponding to the particular ISO class, that area fails and cannot be classified as such. Excuse me, one thing to note here, at the bottom of the table in small writing, it specifically mentions the numbers pertaining to particles of a particular size, 0.5 micron or larger. So why are zero point 0.5 micron sized particles of importance? Well, there's one thing you should know about microorganisms. Rarely do they just free float in the air by themselves. They actually travel on particles. And if you haven't already guessed, they're usually attached to particles that are zero point 0.5 micron or larger. One other interesting point worth mentioning is that this may seem like common sense, but the larger the particle, the more dense it is, the heavier it is. These larger size particles are the ones that tend to settle on surfaces. Smaller, lighter particles can stay free floating in the air, but it's the job of our engineering controls to push them away from our critical areas and hopefully push them down toward the ground where they're not a threat to our preparations. Excuse me. Now, if you have high particle counts in your clean room or your primary engineering control, does that mean that every one of those particles has a microorganism attached to it? No, not necessarily. However, taking particle counts is a great general way of looking at the state of the cleanliness of your clean room. Another question is, do we know the percentage of particles that have microorganisms attached to them? To be completely honest, I'm not sure if there's been a study done to make that correlation, but one thing that's for certain is that the higher the particle count in your classified areas, the higher the chance for contamination. One point I really want to drive home here is that when we get our clean room certified and we're looking at the number of particle counts, you can glean a lot of information from that report. If you have high particle counts in a particular area, you can look inside your room and see what might be causing those high particle counts. So how do particles get inside our clean room? Great question. They travel on materials that are brought into the clean room. They can be on equipment and, of course, on people that are going in and out of the clean room. Okay, great. We know what particle sizes we're looking for. Why those particle sizes are important because they carry microorganisms, and we know how they get into the clean room. The next question is, how do we keep them out of the clean room? This comes down to a few simple and easy practices that you can do on a daily basis to minimize the number of particles you're bringing into the clean room. First, let's talk about people. It's inevitable that people are going to be in the clean room since they're the ones performing the compounding. It comes down to how these people are gowned, how much skin is visible, and their general behavior while they're inside the clean room. As I said before, if our engineering controls are doing their job properly, they're hopefully pushing particles out of our primary engineering controls, and the secondary engineering controls are pushing them down toward the ground. This is where good daily practices come into play. As a clean room operator, we should have an awareness at all times of all the things I've just gone over. Just being in the clean room, as people, we're disrupting the flow of air. So we want to do our best to disrupt this airflow as little as possible. And we do that by moving slowly, methodically, and purposefully. You don't want your operators rushing around using fast hand movements or shuffling their feet, which only puts the particles that may be on the ground back up into the air. Another way of minimizing particle counts is always wiping off materials with disinfectants prior to bringing them into the clean room and also prior to putting them into our primary engineering controls. This is absolutely critical. Using a wipe saturated in disinfectant and using unidirectional strokes to wipe off the materials prior to bringing them into the clean room drastically reduces the amount of particulate you're putting into your controlled environment. Lastly, having cleaning protocols that remove particulate from the clean room is also of utmost importance. According to USP 787, at minimum, we should be cleaning our floors on a daily basis. Again, the floor, if our engineering controls are doing their job properly, is where a lot of these particles will reside. So cleaning the floors on a daily basis removes particles as well. We should also be wiping off and disinfecting our critical surfaces frequently. In particular, your primary engineering control should be cleaned prior to every use and after every use. And according to USP 797, they should be cleaned and disinfected every 30 minutes during continuous use. I'm going to actually reference the 2019 revision of USP 797, which is currently an appeal because of the BUD sections of the standard. However, this table should not be disregarded, as it's a great guide for what surfaces should be cleaned and how often it should be performed. So keeping particulate down to a minimum is of utmost importance. Why? Just to review, particles are what microorganisms travel on. So if you're able to control the number of particles, you're able to control the level of microorganisms. Review this with your operators on a regular basis, and it should absolutely be a part of your regular training. So that's all I have for now. I hope you guys have a great Friday, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. I'm going to be posting this on multiple media formats, on the podcast, on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel if you want more information like this, if this is helpful. And that's all. Again, that's all I have. So have a great Friday. Have a good weekend. And as always, keep raising the bar.
The Pharmacy Inspection Podcast is powered by lyceumce.com, where you can find engaging video-based continuing education programs, as well as a social community for pharmacists and technicians. Join one of the discussion groups or forums and post your questions to the group. Lyceum CE, where fun CE gets done.